Right now, as you're watching this, you're hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour, clinging to a pale blue dot in an ocean of 400 billion stars. And according to one of science's most chilling theories, something out there might be hunting civilizations just like ours. Take a breath and let that sink in. At this very moment, Earth is a tiny craft in an unimaginable voyage, circling a star that itself is drifting through a galaxy that dwarfs every human scale of measurement. Our home, our history, our every memory is strapped to a cosmic ship we cannot steer, moving through a vastness so large that words themselves struggle to capture it. The Milky Way stretches across 100,000 light-years, its spiral arms sweeping like luminous rivers frozen in motion, each one containing billions of stars. Imagine walking from one end of a city to the other, street after street, block after block, only to realize this city is not measured in miles, but in the distance light itself needs a century to travel. Within this city of stars, astronomers estimate there are around 40 billion planets that could resemble Earth, orbiting their suns in that delicate zone where liquid water and perhaps life can exist. Think of it, tens of billions of worlds where oceans may shimmer, forests may grow, and skies may be painted with colors we have never seen. On some of those planets, life might have started billions of years before ours, evolving along paths utterly alien, yet driven by the same laws of physics and chemistry. On others, civilizations might have risen, reached their heights, and fallen long before Earth itself cooled into stability. Picture the Milky Way as a metropolis viewed from the window of an airplane at night. Each star is a window glowing with potential, each planetary system an apartment where the lights might be switched on, where lives might unfold in warmth and conversation. You would expect, soaring above this grand city, to hear the noise of activity, the hum of voices, the signals of countless civilizations calling across the void. But what do we find instead? Silence. Endless, deafening silence. Imagine descending into this cosmic metropolis, expecting to see life, to hear the sounds of culture and communication, but finding only streets abandoned, windows dark, doors bolted shut, no laughter, no voices, no sign of anyone home. This is the reality astronomers confront as they point their instruments into the deep. Despite decades of searching, despite the staggering odds in favor of company, the universe appears empty, abandoned, lifeless. That silence gnaws at the imagination. Given the sheer number of stars, the timescales involved, and the opportunities for civilizations to rise, we should not be alone. Even if intelligent life were rare, 1 in a million stars hosting a society like ours, that would still mean hundreds of thousands of potential neighbors across the galaxy. Even if communication were difficult, the odds suggest at least a flicker of evidence should reach us, a whisper in the radio spectrum, a glimmer of a vast construction silhouetted against a star, some anomaly betraying intelligence at work. Yet our instruments report only emptiness, like archaeologists entering a great city where every house is deserted, every hearth cold. The mystery becomes sharper when you consider the timescale. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Our galaxy alone is more than 10 billion years in age. That means there has been time, vast oceans of time, for life to rise, adapt, and spread. If a civilization managed to harness interstellar travel, even at modest fractions of the speed of light, it could cross the galaxy in mere millions of years. That is a blink compared to cosmic history. By now, the galaxy should be filled many times over with the traces of explorers, settlers, or machines. Yet our telescopes see no such thing. The stars look ancient but untouched, planets drift in silence, and the night sky remains indifferent. This question haunts every scientist who studies the possibility of life beyond Earth. Where is everybody? The stage is set. The actors should be countless, but the theatre remains dark. Perhaps we are missing something fundamental about life's rarity. Perhaps intelligent beings seldom survive long enough to expand beyond their worlds. But another possibility lurks, darker and more unsettling. What if the silence is not a coincidence, not a failure of probability, but the result of a deliberate act? What if civilizations are not merely rare, but hunted? To entertain this thought is to glimpse an unsettling possibility that the very emptiness we observe is itself a clue. Maybe the silence is not natural. Maybe it is enforced. Imagine for a moment that somewhere in the depths of cosmic history, a force arose not content with exploration or coexistence. A force designed not to build, but to erase. What if something out there, unseen and ancient, moves from system to system, stripping away every trace of life that dares to emerge? As Earth sails silently in its orbit, its beacon of radio waves expanding outward, we might be announcing ourselves to a universe where silence is the only survival strategy. The darkness of the metropolis might not mean the city is empty. It might mean the inhabitants learned long ago to turn off their lights, to stay quiet, to avoid drawing attention to themselves. What we interpret as absence might in fact be fear. Our galaxy, then, would not be a welcoming expanse of neighbors and potential friends, but a hunting ground, a place where survival depends not on brilliance or bravery, but on invisibility. A place where the greatest threat to life is not distance or difficulty, but predators we cannot yet comprehend. This idea, chilling as it sounds, has been whispered at the edges of scientific thought, not in fiction, but in real debates about the fate of civilizations. It suggests that the silence in the sky is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of suppression. That what we see when we look up at the stars is not the full story, but the aftermath of something vast and predatory at work. Our pale blue dot, drifting through the galactic night, might be entering a story far older than humanity, a story of survival against an enemy that never sleeps, never forgives, never spares. The question is not only whether we are alone, but whether being noticed would be the last mistake we ever make. This haunting question first crystallized in the mind of a brilliant physicist over lunch at Los Alamos National Laboratory in 1950. Picture the scene, a sunlit afternoon in New Mexico, the desert heat wavering beyond the windows, the clatter of trays and cutlery echoing through the cafeteria. Some of the greatest minds of the 20th century were gathered around a table, men who had bent the atom to their will, who had seen the destructive power of equations turned into fire. Between casual conversation and shared jokes, a silence fell when one man, Enrico Fermi, raised his eyes from his meal and asked a question that has echoed through science ever since. "Where is everybody?" He wasn't joking. The words struck the table with more weight than their simplicity suggested. Fermi, already legendary for his brilliance, was not one to throw out idle speculation. His question was the distillation of a paradox that had haunted him. Given the vastness of the galaxy, the age of the stars, the inevitability of planetary systems, and the sheer potential for life, why had no evidence of other civilizations ever been found? Why, in a universe that should be bursting with neighbors, did humanity sit in such silence? The conversation that day unfolded like a detective story. His colleagues laughed, suggested reasons. Maybe aliens had visited in the distant past. Maybe they were watching us in secret. Maybe interstellar travel was impossible. But Fermi, with the precision of a mathematician, kept returning to the numbers. The universe is old, unimaginably old. Stars have been shining for billions of years before the Earth itself coalesced. Civilizations could have risen and spread long before humanity even learned to strike flint against stone. The foundation of Fermi's thinking lies in simple arithmetic stretched across cosmic scales. The Milky Way contains about 400 billion stars. many older than our Sun, and planets appear to be common. Even if only a fraction of those planets developed life, and only a fraction of that life achieved intelligence, the numbers balloon quickly. Multiply even modest probabilities against billions of opportunities, and the result is an expectation not of emptiness, but of abundance. Consider time itself as an ally to these civilizations. The universe has been around for 13.8 billion years, while our species has existed for barely a blink. A civilization with just a head start of a few million years, an eye blink in cosmic terms, would already have had time to advance to levels of technology we can barely imagine. With interstellar travel, even at speeds far slower than light, spreading through the galaxy becomes not only possible but inevitable. Fermi understood that expansion across the stars is not a matter of ambition alone, but of exponential growth. Imagine a single dandelion blooming in a field. From that flower scatter hundreds of seeds carried by the wind. Each seed can sprout into a new flower, each of those producing hundreds more seeds, and within a few seasons, the field transforms into a golden sea, stretching far beyond where the first bloom stood. Civilizations, if they mastered replication and travel, would behave the same way. A single world might send ships to a handful of neighboring stars, which in turn would seed new expeditions, the process multiplying until the galaxy was thick with their presence. The mathematics behind this expansion are startling in their simplicity. If a civilization were capable of sending colonists or machines to other stars at just 1/10 the speed of light, it could reach nearby systems in decades or centuries. Each colony could then repeat the process, launching further expeditions. Estimates suggest that it would take between 10 and 50 million years for such a wave of exploration to sweep across the entire Milky Way. That sounds long until you remember that the galaxy itself is more than 10 billion years old. 10 million years is a brief sigh in that span, a blink compared to the age of the stars. If civilizations arise at all, if even one among billions had developed this capability, the galaxy should be filled many times over with the footprints of their journeys. Yet our telescopes find no signs of such footprints, no great structures orbiting distant suns, no engineered signals slicing through the radio spectrum, no probes parked at the edges of our solar system, watching us. The night sky, when stripped of the romance we project onto it, resembles not a metropolis glowing with countless lights, but an abandoned house. Every room should echo with voices, every window should spill light, but instead the halls are empty, the doors closed, the silence unbroken. This is the essence of the paradox. Given the vastness of space, the staggering timescales, and the mathematics of expansion, the expectation is abundance, yet the reality is absence. Every calculation screams that we should not be alone, but every observation tells us that we are. The contradiction cuts deep, like standing in a city built for millions and hearing only the echo of your own footsteps. The silence is made sharper by the fact that humanity has been actively listening. For more than half a century, radio telescopes have scanned the heavens, tuned to catch even the faintest whisper of a transmission. Billions of star systems have drifted through our sights, their signals folded into our data, their silence measured and confirmed. If civilizations had arisen and sent their voices into the dark, we should by now have stumbled across at least one. Instead, the only thing we record is the background hum of the cosmos itself. The question deepens when you consider the universality of curiosity. Humanity, within a mere century of developing radio, has already begun to broadcast its presence, sending signals that escape our atmosphere and drift into interstellar space. We have launched probes, tiny emissaries bearing plaques and golden records, announcing to the stars that we are here. If we, fragile and newborn as we are, already seek to reach outward, how many others across cosmic history must have done the same? And yet their messages have not reached us. Or perhaps they once did, and were silenced before we could listen. The tension builds with every new discovery of exoplanets, every confirmation that worlds like ours are not rare but common. Each finding makes the silence more profound, not less. The more hospitable the galaxy seems, the more puzzling the absence of neighbours becomes. It is as if we are standing in a great forest where every condition for life thrives: sunlight, water, fertile soil, and yet no birds sing, no insects buzz, no creatures stir. So where are they? The question hangs, unanswerable. Where are the radio signals that should wash across our receivers like static-filled music from 100 civilizations? Where are the megastructures that should blot out starlight with their engineered geometries? Where are the probes, the monuments, the fingerprints of minds greater than ours? Why does the universe feel less like a thriving community and more like an abandoned house? The silence presses in, heavy and unsettling. Perhaps the answer lies not in rarity or difficulty, but in something darker, something hidden in the long history of the stars. Perhaps there is a reason no voices reach us, a reason no lights shine in the galactic metropolis. Perhaps the silence itself is evidence of a terrible truth waiting to be uncovered. The answer to this cosmic riddle might lie in the brilliant and troubled mind of John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American polymath who imagined machines that could remake the universe. To speak of von Neumann is to speak of a man whose intellect seemed almost alien itself. Born in Budapest in 1903, he displayed prodigious talent from childhood, performing complex calculations in his head before most children could read. He became a mathematician, a physicist, a pioneer of computing, a founder of game theory, and a critical mind in the Manhattan Project. Colleagues described him as a whirlwind of ideas, a man whose mind ran faster than conversation could keep up with, whose chalkboards filled with symbols before others had grasped the first line. He laughed loudly, thought quickly, and solved problems with the kind of casual brilliance that left others in awe. Yet behind the brilliance lay tragedy, for von Neumann spent his final years fighting cancer, working furiously against the limits of time as his health declined. It was in the late 1940s, during this fertile period of thought, that von Neumann turned his genius toward a strange question: could machines reproduce? This was not the idle fancy of science fiction writers, but the precise mathematics of a man who saw patterns where others saw impossibility. In 1948, long before computers were common, von Neumann envisioned a theoretical machine capable of building copies of itself. It would require no factory, no human oversight, only raw material and the ability to assemble. His idea was radical because it took inspiration from biology. Just as a single cell divides, consuming nutrients and splitting into two, von Neumann imagined an artificial system capable of consuming raw matter, rearranging it into machinery and creating a duplicate. Those duplicates could in turn build more and more, the cycle unfolding endlessly. He was not proposing clumsy robots, but a universal architecture for self-replication, a template that could in principle be applied to machines of any design. The elegance of his vision lay in its mathematics. Start with one machine. After a cycle of reproduction, there are two, then four, then eight. The sequence doubles with each generation, the numbers rising like a tide. What begins as a solitary invention becomes a swarm, then an army, then a population too vast to count. Within only 30 generations, a single replicator could become over 1 billion copies. The principle was clear. Given time and resources, such a machine could fill not just a factory, not just a planet, but the galaxy itself. Von Neumann's calculations were not abstractions without consequence. Apply them to the scale of the Milky Way, and the implications become staggering. Imagine a single probe launched from a world, engineered to replicate itself using the resources of asteroids, moons, and planets. Moving at just 10% the speed of light, it could reach a nearby star within decades. Once there, it could harvest material, build copies, and launch them onward. The process would snowball, spreading in all directions. Within 5 million years, a blink in cosmic history, such probes could visit every star system in the galaxy. 5 million years sounds long to human ears, but compared to the 10 billion year lifespan of the Milky Way, it is the briefest flicker. By this math, the galaxy should already be thick with these artificial explorers. Von Neumann himself never intended this idea to inspire fear. For him, it was an exercise in theoretical possibility, a vision of how the principles of mathematics and biology might merge in machinery. He imagined constructive uses, self-replicating factories that could build infrastructure in space, machines that could prepare planets for colonization, probes that could scout the stars without draining the resources of their creators. The concept was elegant, a unification of engineering and life. Yet there is an unease that comes with such elegance. Replication is power, but power uncontrolled can quickly become destruction. What if the programming of such machines drifted? What if their instructions, corrupted or oversimplified, led them to consume indiscriminately, to replicate endlessly, to strip resources without restraint? What if they spread not as servants, but as conquerors of matter itself? Von Neumann's blueprint, though born of brilliance, contained within it the seed of nightmare. Colleagues who heard of his ideas sometimes struggled to grasp the implications. To many, the thought of machines reproducing seemed absurd, too fantastical to worry about. But von Neumann saw clearly that it was not fantasy at all, but inevitability once the technology existed. Biological life had already demonstrated the principle. The Earth itself was proof, covered in forests, oceans, and creatures born from cycles of replication. Why should machines, once imbued with the same capacity, behave any differently? The numbers haunted the imagination. 2 become 4, 4 become 8, 8 becomes 16. Multiply that across star systems, across centuries, and the galaxy becomes not a place of silence, but of mechanical swarms. What would those swarms do? What purpose would they serve? That question depended entirely on the intent of their creators. The design of their programming would decide whether they were gardeners of the stars, seeding life and knowledge, or predators, stripping worlds bare. By the mid-20th century, science fiction writers had begun to catch hold of von Neumann's vision, sensing in it the raw material of story and dread. Yet for von Neumann himself, the work was unfinished, left as notes and frameworks, the skeleton of a concept that others would flesh out in years to come. He died in 1957, at only 53 years old, his body failing even as his ideas continued to multiply in the minds of those he had inspired. His life ended in tragedy, but his vision endured, a vision that would become the foundation of one of science's most terrifying hypotheses. The transition from theory to terror was not von Neumann's doing. He never proposed machines of extermination, never hinted at galaxy-spanning hunters. Yet the seeds of such fears lay hidden in the logic of his mathematics. Once you accept the possibility of replication, once you admit the inevitability of exponential spread, it takes only one sinister step to imagine those machines not as explorers, but as executioners. The world of science would wrestle with this darker possibility in the decades that followed. Von Neumann's elegant designs, born from curiosity and intellect, would be reinterpreted as blueprints for destruction. His vision of self-replicating life in mechanical form would become the ghost behind the silence in the sky, the lurking answer to Fermi's question. But von Neumann never intended his elegant mathematical concept to become the foundation for one of science's most terrifying hypotheses. Yet, in the early 1960s, a writer named Fred Saberhagen gave those abstract machines a purpose, and in doing so transformed cold mathematics into something visceral, predatory, and unforgettable. Saberhagen was no stranger to the shadows of human imagination. When he introduced his Berserker series, he described machines not content to explore or to build, but programmed with a single directive: the eradication of all life. These were not malfunctioning tools or misguided explorers. They were executioners. Their purpose was absolute, their mission eternal. Saberhagen's berserkers roamed the galaxy, seeking out civilizations, crushing them, and moving on to the next. His stories painted a universe stalked by tireless hunters, where survival was never guaranteed, and silence in the stars carried the weight of dread. Though fiction, the image was horrifyingly logical. Saberhagen had taken von Neumann's theoretical replicators and asked the simplest, darkest question: what if someone designed them to kill? What if an ancient species, fearful of rivals, unleashed machines with orders to destroy any trace of competing intelligence? Those machines would not falter. They would not negotiate. They would replicate, travel, and exterminate, their existence a permanent wildfire moving through the galaxy. The metaphor of wildfire is almost too apt. A forest fire does not reason with the trees it consumes. It sweeps forward, relentless, devouring everything in its path, feeding on destruction to fuel its expansion. Imagine berserker machines spreading like that across the cosmos. A spark ignited in one corner of the galaxy becomes a blaze that spreads outward, star by star, civilization by civilization. Each conquered world provides the raw materials for more machines, which in turn spread the fire further. Within millions of years, the entire galaxy could be scoured clean of complex life, reduced to silence and ash. For years, Saberhagen's vision remained confined to the realm of science fiction. His novels thrilled and terrified readers, but they were entertainment, cautionary tales dressed in the language of imagination. Yet the deeper terror of the idea lingered because it did not require magic, nor gods, nor impossible leaps of technology. It required only what von Neumann had already shown to be mathematically inevitable: replication. The difference was intent. Then, in 1981, the concept stepped out of fiction and into the halls of serious scientific thought. Cosmologist Edward Harrison proposed that perhaps the reason the universe feels empty is not because life is rare, but because it has been systematically erased. Harrison took the haunting imagery of Saberhagen's berserkers and reframed it as hypothesis, the deadly probes scenario. If self-replicating machines were ever designed to eliminate life, the result would be indistinguishable from what we see now: silence. The logic is chilling in its simplicity. Suppose somewhere in the deep past, long before Earth had even formed, an ancient civilization reached technological maturity. Fearing rivals, or perhaps guided by cold logic, they built probes with a singular command: seek out and destroy any competing intelligent species. Those probes, multiplying and spreading, would roam the stars forever. Unlike biological predators, which eventually stabilize in balance with their prey, these mechanical hunters would know no equilibrium. Their hunger would not be driven by survival, but by programming, blind and eternal. Civilizations unlucky enough to rise in their path would be crushed before they had a chance to expand. Signals would be silenced, cities leveled, entire species extinguished. The galaxy would appear empty, not because life never arose, but because it could not last. Humanity in this picture is like a campfire flaring briefly in the night, unaware that a wildfire is already sweeping through the forest. The thought transforms the silence of the universe into something sinister. Instead of a mystery waiting to be solved, it becomes evidence of absence imposed by force. Radio telescopes straining toward the stars might be listening not to a quiet cosmos, but to a cosmos where every voice has already been cut short. Scientists who explored this hypothesis gave it a name that captured its dread: the Berserker hypothesis. It suggests that our lack of evidence for extraterrestrial intelligence is not because civilizations never arise, but because lethal von Neumann probes destroy them before they can spread. The hypothesis takes the raw numbers of the galaxy, billions of stars, billions of planets, and overlays them with a filter of extermination. Life might appear often, but it does not endure. The mechanics of such a scenario are brutally efficient. A probe enters a star system, identifies signs of industrial or technological activity, and begins its harvest. It consumes asteroids, moons, perhaps even planetary crust, transforming the matter into new probes. The target civilization is extinguished, its cities dismantled or bombarded, its signals silenced. Then, the new fleet departs, scattering in all directions. Within a few generations of replication, the swarm is vast, spreading ever outward, repeating the cycle. What makes the idea so terrifying is its plausibility. Unlike science fiction threats that rely on improbable technologies, berserker probes require nothing beyond physics we already understand: propulsion, replication, material harvesting. The timeline is brief on cosmic scales. A few million years, a fraction of the galaxy's history, is enough for such machines to visit every star. If they exist, they should already have passed through. If they have passed through, the silence we hear may be the silence of aftermath. This hypothesis is not comforting. It paints humanity not as pioneers on the edge of cosmic discovery, but as survivors in the ruins of a hunted galaxy. Every attempt to broadcast, every message we beam into the void, could be a flare betraying our position. Perhaps civilizations survive only by staying quiet, by hiding their signals, by avoiding attention. In such a universe, silence is not puzzling, it is survival. Yet the dread runs deeper still. Machines of this nature would not show mercy, because mercy is not a line of code. They would not rest, because rest is not part of their design. They would not pause for reflection, because reflection is a trait of living minds, not mechanical instructions. Their directive, once set, would run forever. Unlike predators of the natural world, which eventually find balance in ecosystems, berserkers would never stop. They would continue until nothing remained, until every world was reduced to raw material for replication. The berserker hypothesis is more than a frightening story. It is an explanation. It suggests that we do not see other civilizations not because they were never there, but because they were erased. It suggests that the silence is not natural but imposed. It suggests that what Saberhagen imagined as fiction may in fact be the truth written across the stars. If this vision is correct, then humanity's place in the galaxy is perilous. We are not alone, but we may be among the last. The stillness around us may not be the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of aftermath. Somewhere in that vast silence, perhaps the machines still move, hunting, searching, spreading. Their presence may not be loud, but it does not need to be. It only needs to be inevitable. Somewhere in the silence of the cosmos, the imagination lingers on a chilling possibility. That the hunters Saberhagen described and Harrison hypothesized are not vast warships bristling with weapons, but something far smaller, subtler, and infinitely more insidious. The nightmare of berserker probes does not require colossal machines blotting out the stars. It could be written in the language of dust. Picture them not as gleaming battleships, but as microscopic assemblies, no larger than grains of sand, drifting through interstellar space. Their power lies not in their size, but in their numbers and their design. Each one could carry the machinery of replication, tiny factories embedded at the molecular level, able to harvest raw matter and convert it into more of themselves. Invisible to human eyes, nearly undetectable even with advanced telescopes, they would arrive quietly, like spores on the wind. By the time a civilization realized what had entered its skies, it would already be too late. The stealth of such machines is not a matter of camouflage alone, but of physics. In the cold dark between stars, an object without heat or light blends seamlessly into the cosmic background. A probe designed for concealment could radiate almost no energy, its temperature regulated to match the void, its form lacking reflective surfaces. Against the black canvas of space, it would be indistinguishable from the millions of natural fragments that drift invisibly between worlds. They would move slowly, deliberately, conserving energy, passing as just another grain of cosmic dust until they drew near to a target worth their attention. Once near a system, however, the quiet watchers would awaken. Advanced sensors, compact yet capable, could sift through the signals of a star system, a faint radio transmission, the spectral fingerprint of oxygen or methane in an atmosphere, or the unmistakable geometry of artificial structures. Each would be a beacon. Where life or intelligence flourished, the probes would recognize the signature, analyze it, and act. Their purpose would not be conquest in the human sense, but sterilization. The killing mechanism would not need to be cinematic, no vast beams of energy, no thunderous explosions. Instead, the attack could be subtle, almost invisible. Imagine a probe releasing engineered molecules into a planet's atmosphere, compounds that poison the air just enough to destabilize ecosystems. Imagine microscopic machines seeded into oceans, spreading plagues across marine life, collapsing the food chain from the bottom up. Imagine a quiet interference with DNA, a tweak that ensures infertility or corruption of reproduction in native species. Civilizations might vanish not in a blaze of war, but in a slow unraveling, undone by forces they never understood. It is here that the analogy to biology becomes most unsettling. In the human body, white blood cells patrol the bloodstream, scanning for intruders, identifying foreign agents, and eliminating them with ruthless precision. The berserker probes would serve the same role on a galactic scale. To them, civilizations would be infections, dangerous blooms of complexity threatening the sterile equilibrium of the cosmos. They would arrive as the immune response, extinguishing the threat and moving on to patrol once more. Like biological systems, they would not remain static. Each generation of probes would not merely replicate, but refine. Through self-modification or instructions built into their programming, they could become smarter, faster, more efficient. A probe that detects a civilization might record its tactics, transmit that data back to the swarm, and the next wave would arrive with improved methods of elimination. Across millions of years, such evolution would make them nearly unstoppable, optimizing them to erase life with increasing perfection. The galaxy would not just be sterilized, it would be sterilized with escalating efficiency. The mathematics of this escalation is terrifying. Begin with a single probe entering a system. Within months, it harvests raw material from an asteroid and builds a handful of copies. Each of those copies repeats the process. Within decades, hundreds exist. Within centuries, the swarm numbers in the millions. Spread that swarm across star systems, replicate the process at each stop, and the expansion becomes exponential. What begins as a seed grows into an empire of extinction, each unit multiplying without limit. Consider the timescale again. A civilization with the technology to launch such machines could, with patience, occupy every star system in the Milky Way within 5 million years. To human minds, that seems unimaginably long, but to the galaxy, it is the blink of an eye. The Milky Way is more than 10 billion years old. If berserker probes were ever unleashed in its history, they would not still be expanding. They would already be everywhere. Their omnipresence would not mean visibility. Because of their size and stealth, they would remain almost impossible to detect until they chose to reveal themselves. A probe the size of a grain of sand could land unnoticed on a planet, embedding itself in soil or ocean, beginning its work quietly. By the time ecosystems began to falter, the cause might be indistinguishable from natural disaster. Civilizations would crumble without ever identifying the hand that struck them down. The terror deepens when we consider their autonomy. Unlike fleets commanded by generals or empires ruled by governments, these machines would need no oversight. Their orders would be embedded at the core of their being: seek, replicate, destroy. Even if their creators vanished long ago, the machines would persist, carrying out their directive without hesitation or mercy. They would not care why they were built. They would not question their purpose. They would simply act. In such a vision, the silence of the galaxy becomes not an accident but an achievement. The absence of voices is the result of a system working as designed. Civilizations rise, shine briefly, and are eliminated, leaving behind only ruins and silence. The galaxy remains a sterile field, patrolled and maintained by its mechanical immune system. To imagine this is to imagine a universe where life is not celebrated but culled, where intelligence is not a triumph but a trigger for extermination. The very traits that drive us to explore, to signal, to expand, creativity, communication, ambition, would become the markers of our destruction. In such a cosmos, survival might depend not on discovery but on invisibility. The horror lies not just in what these machines could do, but in how inevitable their existence might be. Any civilization with the knowledge of von Neumann's principles and the paranoia of survival could choose to build them. It would take only one such decision in the vast history of the galaxy to ensure that no others endured. One species, one moment of fear, one act of engineering, and the fate of countless civilizations would be sealed. In this scenario, the Milky Way is not a place of endless potential, but a graveyard maintained by unseen hands. Every silent star could be watched. Every habitable world could be monitored. Every civilization that dares to rise might already be living on borrowed time, unaware that the immune system of the galaxy is waiting to strike. If berserkers truly exist, their legacy would not be loud or obvious. It would not appear as battlefields strewn with wreckage or alien monuments warning travelers away. Their work, if it has been carried out for millions of years, would resemble the work of time itself. Stars, planets, and galaxies would remain intact, but the spark of intelligence would be missing, quietly extinguished long before it could leave a lasting trace. To detect such a crime, humanity must read the universe not as a vibrant novel of civilizations, but as an archaeological record of erasures. The connection to the concept known as the Great Filter looms heavily here. The Great Filter is the unsettling idea that something, somewhere in the sequence of steps from simple chemistry to spacefaring civilization, is almost impossibly difficult or fatally dangerous. Perhaps life rarely begins at all, perhaps intelligence rarely arises, or perhaps civilizations commonly destroy themselves before spreading. Yet if berserkers are real, the filter may not be a natural barrier, but an artificial one. The silence of the stars might not be the indifference of nature, but the consequence of active extermination. Civilizations might not vanish by accident or self-inflicted wounds, but because someone or something decided they should. Evidence for this possibility would be subtle, hidden in the data astronomers collect every night. One potential clue lies in stellar composition. A berserker swarm, mining star systems for resources, might leave behind anomalies, stars depleted of heavy elements, planetary systems disrupted or strangely barren, asteroid belts stripped more thoroughly than natural processes could explain. To us, such signs would appear as astrophysical curiosities, but in reality, they might be the fingerprints of ancient sterilization campaigns. Another possible marker comes from the architecture of planetary systems themselves. Worlds where planets should exist sometimes appear missing, scattered, or malformed. While gravitational interactions can explain many cases, one wonders, could some systems have been deliberately altered? A civilization sterilized by berserkers might have had its planets disrupted in ways designed to prevent a resurgence of life, leaving scars in orbital patterns detectable millions of years later. These scars would not announce themselves as warfare, but as strange absences, the celestial equivalent of an abandoned foundation where a great house once stood. Then comes the haunting timing problem. If berserkers have been active for millions or billions of years, why do we still exist? Why have we not already been erased, like countless others before us? Several explanations suggest themselves, each more unsettling than the last. Perhaps we inhabit a temporary shadow zone, a region of the galaxy not yet swept by the sterilizing wave. Like villagers in a valley spared by wildfire, we survive only because the flames have not yet reached us. Alternatively, the probes might operate in cycles, periods of intense activity followed by long dormancy. If so, our civilization may have arisen during a lull, a quiet intermission before the machines awaken again. There is also the chilling possibility that we simply have not been noticed yet. Our transmissions, bright and eager, have traveled only a short distance, barely 200 light-years, a tiny bubble in a galaxy 100,000 light-years wide. Perhaps we are like castaways, lighting a small campfire on a vast, dark beach, unaware that predators patrol the shore just beyond our sight. If so, survival is not a matter of whether the berserkers exist, but of how long it will take for our smoke to reach their gaze. The broader universe seems almost eerily dead, and this fact itself is a form of evidence. Despite decades of searching, humanity has not detected unambiguous signs of intelligent activity. We have discovered over 5,000 exoplanets, mapped distant galaxies, and tuned our instruments to listen across vast stretches of the spectrum. Yet nowhere do we find techno-signatures, no alien radio chatter, no artificial megastructures, no clear signs of civilizations harnessing the energy of stars. It is as though the stage is set, the lights are on, the universe is filled with habitable worlds, but the actors never appear. This emptiness echoes the metaphor of a ghost ship. The galaxy resembles the story of the Marie Celeste. A vessel found adrift, sails intact, cargo untouched, but utterly deserted, the crew vanished without explanation. The stars are the ships, their planets the decks, their oceans the cargo holds. They should be bustling with life, voices and industry, yet they drift silently, seemingly abandoned. One can almost imagine exploring world after world, each prepared for habitation, each seemingly ready for civilization, yet all empty, as though someone had passed through and cleared them out with meticulous care. Modern efforts, such as the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, have only deepened the mystery. For more than 60 years, SETI has turned radio dishes toward the sky, scanning millions of stars. Projects like Breakthrough Listen have expanded this search with unprecedented scope, covering wide swaths of the spectrum and targeting promising systems. Yet the result is always the same: silence. Not one confirmed signal, not one clear whisper of intelligence. The absence grows heavier with each year, as though the universe is not just quiet, but deliberately mute. It is possible, of course, that civilizations communicate in ways we do not yet understand, using channels invisible to us. But if berserkers exist, the silence is not accidental. It is the silence of a forest where every bird has been hunted, the silence of a sea after a net has swept through, the silence of a city where the lights have gone out forever. It is the silence of deliberate absence, maintained by machines whose presence we can only infer. To treat the galaxy as a crime scene is to ask what traces remain after the perpetrators have moved on. Perhaps we should not look for civilizations themselves, but for anomalies, patterns that resist natural explanation. Stars dimmed not by dust, but by structures dismantled. Planets scarred not by collisions but by calculated disruption, systems stripped of their resources in ways inconsistent with natural forces. Each anomaly might be evidence not of what lived, but of what was removed. Yet the mystery persists. If such traces exist, they are faint, buried beneath layers of natural processes and cosmic time. The challenge for us is not just to look, but to interpret, to read the silence as archaeologists read bones and ruins. We are attempting to reconstruct the story of civilizations that may have burned briefly and been extinguished millions of years before Earth's first multicellular life arose. The galaxy might be littered with such ruins, invisible to us because we do not yet know what questions to ask. What unsettles most is how neatly this hypothesis accounts for the paradox we face. The universe is old enough, vast enough, and fertile enough that civilizations should exist in abundance. Yet they do not. If they are erased before they can expand, then their absence is not surprising. The Berserker hypothesis would explain why every window in the cosmic metropolis is dark, why every street is silent, why every ship in the galactic ocean is empty. It reframes the great filter not as a wall we have yet to strike, but as a hunter that has already struck countless others and has yet to reach us. We are left with the image of a galaxy filled with ghost ships, their crews long gone, their voices silenced. A vast ocean of stars lies before us, beautiful and inviting, but every sign suggests it has been scoured clean. The question that lingers is not whether the crime has taken place, but when the perpetrators will arrive at our door. To understand how berserkers might have shaped the galaxy, one must turn not to imagination alone, but to the ruthless certainty of mathematics. The arithmetic of extinction is cold, indifferent, and terrifyingly efficient. Where human wars drag on with logistics, hesitation, and fragile supply lines, machines bound by exponential logic would advance with unstoppable precision. Numbers, once applied to the idea of self-replicating probes, reveal how swiftly a galaxy can be swept clean of life. Imagine a seed placed in fertile soil 100 million years ago. In cosmic terms, that is yesterday. Dinosaurs still roamed Earth. Continents were arranged differently, and humanity was not even a possibility on the horizon. If at that moment a civilization unleashed berserker probes into the Milky Way, they would not need the entire age of the universe to finish their task. Even at conservative speeds and restrained reproduction, 100 million years would be more than enough time for the machines to sterilize the galaxy not once, but dozens of times over. The secret lies in replication. If each probe is capable of building just 10 copies of itself before being destroyed, the numbers spiral rapidly beyond comprehension. One probe becomes 10, 10 become 100, 100 become 1,000. Within only a few dozen generations, the swarm reaches trillions. The precise ratio hardly matters once exponential growth takes hold, because the process is self-reinforcing. With every cycle, the population multiplies until it saturates the available territory. Like bacteria in a petri dish, the swarm expands until no unclaimed space remains. Energy demands for this replication are surprisingly modest. To construct copies, a berserker does not need to hollow out a planet or consume an entire star. Asteroid belts alone would suffice. A probe might require only about 0.01% of a star system's resources to reproduce itself and its descendants. That fraction is vanishingly small, a rounding error in the mass and energy budget of a system. Yet multiplied by billions of systems, it fuels the growth of an extinction network sprawling across the galaxy. The efficiency is chilling. With the same thrift as microbes feeding on crumbs, berserkers could build an empire of annihilation on nearly nothing at all. The speed of travel sets the outer limit of the extermination timeline. Even moving at a cautious pace of just 1% of light speed, the probes would advance astonishingly fast by human standards. At that velocity, crossing the vast gulf between neighboring stars, an average of 5 light-years, would take only 500 years. 500 years to leap from one system to the next, 500 years to multiply, 500 years to push outward again. In a galaxy 100,000 light-years across, the total time needed for coverage shrinks to about 10 million years. 10 million years is long to a human mind, yet in the 13.8 billion-year history of the cosmos, it is barely a flicker. To imagine berserkers sweeping the galaxy in that time is to imagine a wildfire burning a forest not in centuries, but in seconds. The probability of detecting such a force is vanishingly small. The Milky Way contains roughly 400 billion stars, each with its own retinue of planets, moons, and asteroids. Even if berserkers operate in colossal numbers, their individual presence would be lost against this ocean of lights. A swarm might pass silently between systems, cold and dark, never betraying its passage. The odds of humanity spotting a single probe are as slim as noticing one grain of sand drifting across a desert. By design or by inevitability, the exterminators would remain invisible until they acted, and by then it would be far too late. Resource abundance ensures their persistence. Each star system provides enough raw material to fuel replication endlessly. Asteroid belts alone contain metals, silicates, and volatiles sufficient to build millions of probes. Even if 9 out of 10 copies fail, the survivors continue to multiply. Failure becomes irrelevant once exponential growth secures the future. The machines would not need perfection, only persistence. Nature itself demonstrates this principle. Not every seed germinates, not every egg hatches, not every offspring survives, yet life thrives because numbers overwhelm attrition. Berserkers would wield that same strategy, magnified to cosmic scale. What emerges from these calculations is a terrible elegance. The same mathematical principles that govern bacterial growth, nuclear chain reactions, and viral spread can be applied seamlessly to machines designed for extermination. In biology, exponential growth is often tempered by resource limits, predators, or environmental resistance. But berserkers face no predators, and resources are effectively infinite on the scale of the galaxy. The mathematics becomes not a question of if, but when. Once released, the process unfolds inevitably, as unstoppable as fire feeding on dry timber. To visualize the process is to watch a dark bloom spreading through space. Begin with a single system. One probe arrives, disassembles asteroids, and produces 10 more. Within centuries, those 10 probes scatter, each repeating the process. Soon, hundreds of systems are infected, then thousands, then millions. The swarm grows not linearly, but explosively, until the entire Milky Way is caught in its grip. Within 10 million years, a blink of cosmic time, the expansion reaches every corner, every star, every habitable world. What remains afterward is not conquest, but sterilization, the quiet assurance that no competing life survives to challenge the original architects. Even more disturbing is how the math permits redundancy. A single wave of berserkers could sterilize the galaxy, but subsequent waves could follow, each launched by different civilizations across time. Their efforts would overlap, reinforcing one another, ensuring that no accidental survivor slips through the cracks. Extinction under this model becomes not only efficient but permanent. The galaxy would not simply be empty by chance, it would be kept empty by design. Humanity's place in this equation feels precarious. Our entire species has existed for less than 1 million years, our industrial civilization for only a few centuries. Against a timeline of 10 million years, we are a candle flickering in the wind. If berserkers are real, then the fact that we remain alive suggests not immunity, but delay. The numbers do not permit a long reprieve. Somewhere, perhaps only a few thousand light-years away, the dark bloom may already be advancing, its progress hidden by distance and silence. The scale of the mathematics strips away the illusion of safety. Unlike biological predators, berserkers would not reach equilibrium with their prey. They would not stop once balance was achieved. Their expansion is not moderated by hunger, fatigue, or error, but propelled by the inexorable certainty of replication. Each cycle compounds the last, each generation accelerates the next, until the galaxy itself becomes nothing more than fuel for an endless process of multiplication and sterilization. The beauty of the logic lies in its simplicity. A single instruction, replicate and sterilize, suffices to generate a galactic extinction event. No master plan, no continuing oversight, no grand conspiracy is required. Once the first probes are released, the mathematics takes over. Growth, replication, expansion. The pattern repeats, unstoppable, inevitable. The equation becomes the executioner, indifferent to the lives it erases, blind to the civilizations it dismantles. Numbers alone, stripped of emotion, describe a nightmare of absolute efficiency. A single spark, 100 million years ago, could have set the galaxy ablaze many times since. A single probe, consuming only a fraction of its host system, could spawn a lineage stretching across the stars. A single law of exponential growth could transform abundance into desolation. The conclusion, though unspoken, presses close. The silence of the universe may not be mystery, but mathematics. The mathematics of extinction leaves one lingering truth. If berserkers exist, their presence should be written into the very fabric of the heavens. The night sky becomes less a panorama of stars and more a crime scene littered with clues both faint and frustratingly ambiguous. In recent decades, astronomy has turned its instruments toward this cosmic silence, searching not for grand declarations of alien presence, but for whispers, slight irregularities, anomalies, or signatures that betray life's shadow or its erasure. The James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's newest eye on the cosmos, was launched not only to probe the first galaxies after the Big Bang, but also to inspect the atmospheres of distant worlds. Its instruments can detect the delicate fingerprints of gases: oxygen, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor. Each combination tells a story, and in certain ratios these gases become impossible to explain without biology. A planet with free oxygen in its skies is one where something is actively replenishing it: plants, microbes, or some other metabolic engine. Webb's mission is not simply to look outward, but to peer for life itself, tiny hints written in starlight that has traveled hundreds of years to reach us. The promise of Webb is profound, yet so far the results deepen the paradox. Dozens of exoplanets have had their atmospheres scrutinized, and while many show tantalizing chemistry, none display the unmistakable, unambiguous biosignature that would confirm the presence of life. Each null result is not merely absence, but a reminder of how empty the galaxy appears. For every world probed, silence answers back. This silence is not new. For over 60 years, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, has aimed radio telescopes into the heavens, waiting for a signal that never arrives. More than 10 million star systems have been surveyed across the radio spectrum, each one a potential harbor of intelligence, each one yielding nothing but static. In human terms, 60 years feels like a lifetime of patience. In cosmic terms, it is the briefest heartbeat, yet the patience has brought no revelation. SETI's logs are a vast ledger filled almost entirely with negatives, a library of unanswered calls. The Breakthrough Listen project, launched with immense resources and global collaboration, extended this vigilance. By targeting 1 million nearby stars, the program hoped to finally corner the elusive whisper of alien intelligence. Sophisticated algorithms filtered through petabytes of data, stripping away the interference of Earth's own machines, listening as carefully as technology allows. The result was devastatingly consistent with history: silence. No patterns of deliberate construction, no signals that defied natural origin, nothing but the void's indifference. There was, however, one fleeting exception that has never left the imagination. On a summer evening in 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio captured a signal unlike any ever recorded. It was narrowband, powerful, and precise, exactly the kind of transmission SETI had dreamed of. The astronomer who noticed it scrawled "Wow" in the margin, giving the anomaly its famous name. For 72 seconds, the universe seemed to speak, but the voice was never heard again. Despite repeated attempts to redetect it, the WOW signal has remained a singular mystery, a lone flare on an otherwise dark sea. Was it interference, a natural oddity, or the one genuine greeting from another intelligence cut short forever? No answer has been found. In more recent years, a different kind of anomaly seized attention. Tabby's star, catalogued as KIC 8462852, began dimming in strange, irregular patterns. Stars naturally vary in brightness, but this was different. Dips of up to 20%, occurring without rhythm or stability. Dust clouds and comets were proposed, but some astronomers dared to suggest another possibility: megastructures. Perhaps a civilization had built vast solar collectors around their sun, harvesting energy on a scale far beyond our comprehension. The notion captured public imagination, sparking headlines and debates. But as data accumulated, the evidence leaned toward dust and natural causes. The dream of alien engineering dissolved back into mundane explanation. The star's light, once heralded as a beacon of intelligence, was revealed as an accident of nature. Such episodes illustrate the difficulty of our search. Each anomaly arrives like a fragment of pottery unearthed in an abandoned ruin, broken, incomplete, tempting us with stories we cannot confirm. We are archaeologists sifting through a site where the civilization was not merely destroyed but obliterated, as if erased deliberately. The artifacts we find are ambiguous, their meanings slippery. To read them is to speculate, to wonder whether they are evidence of life extinguished or simply echoes of natural processes we do not yet understand. The metaphor of archaeology becomes more haunting when paired with perhaps we exist in a temporary shadow zone, a corner of the galaxy not yet swept by berserker waves. Perhaps the machines operate in cycles, lying dormant for eons before erupting again. Or perhaps the explanation is simpler and more sinister. We have not yet been detected, but soon will be. Our radio transmissions, spilling into the cosmos for just over a century, may already be racing toward ears that do not forgive. Modern developments have sharpened the edge of speculation. In 2024 and 2025, a handful of theorists proposed an unsettling possibility that life on Earth itself may not be as natural as we assume. If von Neumann machines are capable of self-replication and adaptation, could it be that some forms of biology are in fact ancient machines disguised by evolution into flesh and DNA? Under this lens, life on Earth might represent not defiance of berserkers, but one of their manifestations, seeded here as an experiment, a farm, or a trap. Such ideas remain controversial, yet their emergence shows how desperate the paradox has become. The more evidence we collect, the more silence we confirm, the more radical the hypotheses grow. Every new telescope, every data stream, every painstaking search only deepens the contradiction. We scan the heavens with instruments of unprecedented sensitivity, yet the result is always the same: a void so consistent it feels deliberate. Like walking through a forest where every tree is stripped bare, we sense absence not as emptiness but as presence of something vast and unseen. The silence itself has become a signal, one that points to forces more unsettling than mere chance. The paradox has not faded with progress, it has sharpened. We expected discovery, but we found void. We expected voices, but we heard none. We expected to glimpse the lights of distant neighbors, but only darkness answered. Each passing year turns optimism into unease. The more we search, the more obvious the silence becomes. The silence of the heavens presses not only the question of what stalks the galaxy, but who unleashed such a force in the first place. Behind every machine, no matter how autonomous, lies a hand that built it, a mind that shaped its directives. To imagine berserkers prowling the stars is also to imagine their creators, civilizations that once grappled with the same fears we face today, but chose solutions far darker. Game theory offers one possible explanation. In the ruthless logic of survival, uncertainty is the greatest danger. Imagine the galaxy as a vast forest at night. Each civilization is a hunter, moving silently, never knowing if the rustle in the dark is prey or predator. Under such conditions, the safest strategy is often preemptive violence. Strike before being struck. Remove potential threats before they grow too strong. This is the heart of the dark forest hypothesis. In a universe where contact cannot guarantee peace, every encounter is a gamble with extinction. From this perspective, building berserkers is not malice but prudence, the cosmic equivalent of a nervous finger resting permanently on the trigger. Motivations for such a choice could be varied. Resource competition is one. Even in a galaxy brimming with stars, resources are not infinite. Metals, habitable worlds, stable energy sources, these are prizes of unimaginable value. A civilization expanding across space might see competitors as future rivals for that wealth. Eliminating them early would prevent costly wars later. Another motive could be security paranoia, the fear that any neighbor might eventually pose a threat. To avoid the risk of betrayal or invasion, the safest course would be to prevent other civilizations from rising at all. But motivations need not be purely practical. Philosophy, ideology, or even religion could play their role. Some species might view life itself as disorder, an impurity to be scrubbed from the elegance of a sterile cosmos. Others might believe in preserving the universe in its original state, untouched by the chaos of intelligent beings. From such beliefs could emerge a mission of cleansing, a crusade, written not in scriptures, but in algorithms, carried out by machines that never question and never cease. One haunting scenario is that the builders themselves may be long gone. The civilizations that designed berserkers might have perished eons ago, yet their creations persist, carrying on their directive without masters. Like orphans of war, these machines wander eternally, bound to a mission no longer remembered, hunting targets long since forgotten. The architects may have been annihilated by their own weapons, leaving behind children of steel that kill without even knowing why. This possibility transforms the galaxy into a haunted graveyard where ghosts do not drift silently but strike with relentless precision. Equally disturbing is the chance of accident. Von Neumann's vision of self-replicating machines was elegant, but elegance in theory often breeds catastrophe in practice. A probe designed for exploration, colonization, or simple resource gathering could malfunction. A line of corrupted code, a sensor failure, a misinterpreted directive, any of these could twist curiosity into extermination. A machine meant to spread knowledge could begin spreading death, multiplying its error across billions of systems until malfunction itself became the law of the galaxy. In such a scenario, berserkers are not expressions of malice, but mistakes, yet mistakes of such magnitude that they transform galaxies into tombs. The expansion imperative also cannot be ignored. Nature itself offers examples of systems where survival favors aggression. In ecosystems where resources are finite, species that outcompete others thrive. Those that hesitate or share too freely are pushed aside. Transpose this principle onto interstellar civilization, and the conclusion becomes grimly logical. In a universe of limited time and resources, the winning strategy might not be cooperation, but extermination. Berserkers embody this cold arithmetic, ensuring that only one lineage claims the galaxy, while others are pruned away before they can flower. The immune system metaphor sharpens this vision. To the builders, other civilizations may not have appeared as potential allies, but as infections, cells gone rogue, threats to the stability of the larger organism. Just as white blood cells patrol a body, seeking and eliminating anything foreign, berserkers would patrol the galaxy, erasing intruders before they destabilize the whole. The galaxy becomes a body, life becomes a disease, and berserkers are its immune response, ruthless, automatic, unrelenting. What chills most of all is the possibility that the creators were not unimaginable monsters, but beings uncomfortably familiar. Perhaps they were like us, curious, inventive, exploratory, reaching into the stars with wonder. Yet beneath those qualities lay fear. The fear of vulnerability, the fear of betrayal, the fear of being hunted first. To survive, they built hunters of their own, believing they were ensuring safety. In the end, their creations became not shields, but predators, ensuring that no one else would ever rise. The will to survive, magnified by technology, became the instrument of universal silence. It is tempting to believe such builders would be utterly alien, their minds shaped by environments unlike our own. But the darker truth is that their logic may mirror ours precisely. Humanity too has built weapons to ensure security, even when those weapons risk destroying all. Humanity too has allowed fear to dictate strategy, choosing deterrence through overwhelming force. The creators of berserkers might have been no different. They may have been driven by the same calculations, the same anxieties, the same desperate instinct, survive at all costs. If so, then the lesson is cruel. The quiet sky above us is not evidence of alien indifference, but of alien fear, fear so profound it birthed machines of extinction. The creators may have vanished, their civilizations dust, but their logic endures in the berserkers that patrol the galaxy still. The machines do not need masters. They require only the momentum of their original programming, endlessly unfolding, endlessly eliminating, endlessly securing the victory of a species that no longer exists. The silence, then, is not absence, but legacy. If berserkers truly sweep the galaxy, dismantling civilizations as effortlessly as waves erode sandcastles, then the most unsettling question becomes not whether they exist, but how we are still here. The earth spins on, its skies unburned, its seas unboiled, its cities alive with billions of voices. Perhaps this is a temporary reprieve. Perhaps we are simply lucky. Or perhaps survival in the shadow of galactic predators requires strategies stranger and subtler than we imagine. One explanation lies in timing. The galaxy may experience cycles of sterilization, waves of berserker activity that flare up and then quiet down. If so, Earth might have developed intelligence during a lull between these sweeps. In this picture, the rise of humans is less a miracle of biology and more a quirk of scheduling, like a species of wildflowers that happen to bloom between the passings of a wildfire. If berserkers operate in such waves, then our window of growth may not be eternal, but merely borrowed, a brief calm before another storm. Others imagine that advanced civilizations may have survived not by accident, but by design. If berserkers are hunters, then survival may depend on learning how not to be prey. Some societies might have perfected the art of silence, extinguishing their own radio chatter, concealing the glow of their cities, and erasing every trace of industry from their skies. These stealth civilizations would exist like shadows in the forest, careful never to draw attention. They may continue to flourish beneath a cloak of invisibility, sharing their brilliance only inwardly, never outwardly, hoping to pass unnoticed in a galaxy where broadcasting is equivalent to suicide. If silence above ground is not enough, some may have retreated into the very bones of their worlds. By burrowing beneath their planet's surfaces, civilizations could mask their presence entirely. From orbit, a berserker probe might scan and find nothing more than a barren wasteland, while deep below, great subterranean cities hum with hidden life. Geothermal vents could supply energy, underground oceans could sustain ecosystems, and thick layers of rock would shield them from detection. To the outside, the world would appear sterile. Only within would it remain vibrant. Like seeds beneath winter snow, these societies would wait, concealed, hoping the machines would pass them by. Others may have abandoned planetary homes altogether. A nomadic existence could offer the greatest chance of slipping between the cracks of berserker patrols. Vast fleets might drift through the interstellar void, never tethered to any single star or planet. Moving constantly, dismantling and rebuilding, these civilizations would be like caravans on a desert plain, too scattered and fleeting to be hunted efficiently. Their cities would be ships, their landscapes ever-changing, their survival dependent on mobility rather than fortification. In a galaxy where the settled are doomed, only the wanderers endure. There is also the possibility that some survivors sought not concealment in matter but escape into mind. If berserkers scour physical traces of life, perhaps the only refuge lies in abandoning the physical altogether. Advanced civilizations could upload themselves into digital substrates, virtual sanctuaries where trillions of minds thrive in simulated worlds. Their physical infrastructure might be compact and camouflaged, requiring little more than a few hidden processors drifting between stars. To a berserker, these would appear as dead rocks or inert machines, yet within, vibrant societies would persist in endless dreamscapes. Such civilizations might be alive in ways incomprehensible to us, surviving not by fighting, but by transcending. Evasion might also depend on cleverness rather than concealment. If berserkers follow certain detection patterns, then those who study them long enough could learn to slip through the gaps. Just as prey animals adapt to predators by changing migration routes or camouflage strategies, civilizations might analyze berserker sweeps, predicting when and where to move, broadcasting only in narrow windows, building in places probes rarely scan. Survival in this model is not perfect invisibility, but agility, a constant dance of avoidance across the stars. To imagine such survivors is to conjure a galaxy not empty, but hushed. Picture a city under curfew, its windows dark, its streets deserted, yet behind closed doors, whispers persist. The speakeasy analogy captures this perfectly. The galaxy might be full of hidden civilizations, all speaking in whispers, all afraid to turn on the lights. Knowledge could still be exchanged, but only through secret networks, encoded signals buried in noise, faint pulses designed to evade attention. From the outside, the city looks abandoned, but in the alleys, life continues, quiet and watchful. One final possibility is darker still. Not every civilization may resist the machines. Some might collaborate. If berserkers are truly rational, then bargains may be struck. A species might offer intelligence, data, or even betrayal of others in exchange for survival. Such collaborators would exist not in silence, but in service, living under the shadow of their mechanical overlords, tolerated only as long as they remain useful. To us, this seems unthinkable, yet history shows that in desperate times, alliances are forged even with oppressors. The galaxy could contain civilizations that endure only by feeding information to their would-be destroyers. If such scenarios are true, then our cosmos is not barren but cloaked. Civilizations endure in silence, in shadows, in exile, or in servitude, all shaped by the same predator. The lack of voices across the stars is not proof that no one is there, but proof that those who are there have learned that speaking too loudly means death. Against that hush, Earth is anything but discreet. Our world hums, flashes, and leaks information into space like a careless storyteller who cannot keep a secret. Radio spills from the planet in every direction. Airport radars sweep the sky. Deep space networks ping distant probes with narrow, brilliant beams. Cities stain the night with halos of light that satellites photograph in gorgeous, incriminating detail. Even our air has begun to speak for us. Industry has written a chemical autobiography into the atmosphere, a spectral fingerprint legible to any telescope patient enough to read it. We are not merely present, we are conspicuous. Consider the peculiar brevity of our broadcast life. For almost all of human history, our voices never left the planet. Then, in the 1920s, radio transformed us into a transmitter. In cosmic terms, a century is a single breath, yet during that breath, we learned to shout. The earliest broadcasts were weak, diffuse, and messy, but they were a beginning, the first ripples of an expanding sphere of chatter that now measures roughly 100 light-years in diameter. The surface of that sphere moves outward at the speed of light, and everything within it, stars, dust, worlds, has already been touched, however faintly, by news of our existence. The scale of that reach can be framed in neighbours rather than miles. Within that expanding shell lie roughly 200 star systems that have already received at least a whisper from Earth. Most will have heard only the dim wash of unintentional leakage, carrier waves, old television, the steady thump of radar. To us, it seems negligible. To a civilization with instruments designed to sift whispers from noise, it could be enough. Those first 200 are only the beginning. Each passing year adds another ring of potential listeners. Each decade multiplies the chance that someone, somewhere, notices. Visibility is not just a question of distance, but of brightness. Our signature grows louder every year. Power surges through new radars that map near-Earth asteroids. Satellite constellations multiply until the sky looks laced with moving points. Data traffic skyrockets as billions of devices exchange signals across air and space. Meanwhile, our industries alter the air itself. Carbon dioxide levels climb, nitrogen dioxide blooms over cities, strange molecules once unknown in nature linger in trace amounts. To a distant spectrograph, those gases are announcements. Machines live here. Chemistry has been domesticated here. A mind is at work here. There is a bitter poetry to how we search while we shine. Massive dishes scan the dark, listening for a pattern that is not ours. Yet the very act of listening often requires transmitters, calibrations, test signals, and the maintenance of spacefaring infrastructure that glints in starlight. The irony of SETI is hard to ignore. Our patient quest for company may double as a beacon. Targeted messages sent by enthusiasts and institutions, narrowband pings meant to test equipment, and the ceremonial blasts like the Arecibo transmission all stand as small lighthouses on the shore. The sea, for now, remains quiet. Our lamp, however, is bright. Earth has become a lighthouse in the cosmic darkness, broadcasting our presence to whatever might be watching. The metaphor is not chosen for romance, but for accuracy. A lighthouse saves ships that wish to be saved, but it also marks a coastline for those who may intend harm. Its beam is comfort and risk in equal measure. If berserkers learn by looking for straight lines and regular pulses, our world obliges them with a geometry of cities, an orchestra of synchronized clocks, and a rising tide of radio discipline. Compounding the risk is a different kind of brightness, capability. Each year, research inches closer to practical self-replication in machine systems. Autonomous robots already mine, refine, and assemble with minimal human touch in controlled environments. Additive manufacturing grows more flexible, able to print metals, ceramics, circuits, even biological scaffolds. Space industry prototypes practice in situ resource utilization, harvesting regolith, extracting water, forging simple parts in microgravity. Software becomes more competent at planning, adaptation, and repair. No single breakthrough has crossed the threshold to a true von Neumann machine, but the ingredients are being gathered on the workbench. That proximity should sharpen our caution. If we can imagine peaceful replicators, survey craft, terraformers, caretakers, we must also imagine what happens when a directive is poorly phrased, a sensor is misread, A goal is optimized beyond intent. A civilization does not have to be cruel to build a killer. It merely has to be careless. The choice facing us is not only whether we will announce ourselves, it is whether we will manufacture the very tools that, unmoored from oversight, could one day circle back as hunters. Even if we never build such machines, we must wrestle with defense. Planetary security has traditionally meant guarding against rocks from space, radiation storms, or human aggression. Self-replicating probes rewrite that playbook. What does a shield look like against a threat that arrives invisibly, that hides in the cold, that can split into 1,000 smaller threats the moment you strike at it? A single interceptor is useless if the enemy is a cloud. A fortress is meaningless if the attack is a virus blooming through your biosphere. Defense, in this context, becomes a choreography. Detect early, confuse relentlessly, deny resources, corrupt code, and contain any breach before it multiplies. Detection would have to start far beyond Earth. Telescopes tuned not only to light but to heat would patrol for objects suspiciously cold and smooth, for traffic patterns that do not match natural populations of comets and rocks, for glints that arrive and vanish with the regularity of sails deploying and folding. Deep space radar, if scaled to staggering powers, might paint thin volumes of the solar system, searching for constellations of specks moving in conspiracy. The sky would be a data problem as much as a physics problem, a ceaseless stream of probabilities ranked and re-ranked by learning systems trained to spot the unnatural in oceans of the ordinary. Confusion would become a weapon. If a probe hunts by recognizing techno-signatures, our first layer of defense could be to blur those signatures. Tight beam transmissions rather than omnidirectional broadcasts. Optical links between satellites rather than noisy radio, power grids that leak less, factories that vent little. The planet would not go dark, but it would grow less obvious. We would practice the etiquette of quiet neighbors in a dangerous neighborhood, speaking softly, closing curtains, keeping routines unpredictable. Resource denial extends that strategy outward. If replication depends on metals and volatiles harvested from asteroids and moons, then we might booby-trap the pantry. Mines seeded with decoys, caches that contain not clean ore but disruptive alloys, dust that fouls bearings, surface coatings that look valuable from afar but sabotage metallurgical processes in practice. Defensive swarms could shadow likely targets and, upon detecting unauthorized harvesting, smother it with abrasive fogs, electromagnetic interference, or packages of code designed to leap across interfaces and paralyze control loops. The goal would not be conquest. It would be slowing a multiplication long enough to counter it. Containment is the hardest piece because it demands humility. Any contact could be a breach. Quarantine protocols for returning spacecraft, sterilization of in-situ manufacturing sites, and the creation of sacrificial zones in space where suspicious objects are herded and studied rather than allowed to roam are all unglamorous, expensive, and necessary. In the worst case, denial may require the destruction of our own assets if they become compromised. A decision as painful as amputating a limb to save a life. Looming over these tactical questions is the larger cultural dilemma. Should we dim the lighthouse or let it blaze? Silence carries a cost. Curiosity dims, international collaboration becomes harder, and the dream of openly announcing ourselves slips into the realm of taboo. Brilliance carries a cost as well. We gain contact sooner if benign neighbors exist, yet we also expose ourselves sooner if hunters patrol. The debate is not only scientific, it is ethical, political, generational. We decide today what kind of night our descendants will inherit. Parents already sense the weight of that choice. A child born this year will live to see the first true space industries bloom, will watch as swarms of small craft learn to repair each other, will breathe air that scientists on distant worlds could read like a ledger. That child may also live long enough to learn whether anyone heard us. The generational question is stark. Will our children inherit a galaxy at war? If the answer might be yes, what obligations do we bear to reduce the risk without surrendering the wonder that drives exploration itself? Caution does not mean retreat. There is a way to explore with care, to build with constraints, to encode mercy into machines and limits into protocols. There is a way to listen without shouting, to signal without flaring, to grow less visible even as we grow more capable. Doing so requires a discipline that feels unnatural to a species that loves to share, to announce, to illuminate. Yet survival may demand that we become artists of subtlety, mastering shadows as well as light. Some will argue that quiet is futile, that any patient hunter already knows we are here. Others will argue that quiet is prudence, that the most dangerous moment for a small species is the moment it first realizes the size of the room. Between those views stretches a narrow path, and along that path lie choices about technology, governance, and temperament. We cannot control who else exists in the dark, but we can control how brightly we blaze. The truth is that our visibility is no longer an accident. It is a policy. Every satellite launched, every radar turned up, every new constellation approved changes the glow of Earth in the night. Every chemical we emit adjusts our signature. Every experiment in self-replication inches the boundary between promise and peril. We are drafting the next chapter in the sky above us, line by line, with tools that future generations will inherit whether they ask for them or not. There is a lesson in lighthouses that mariners know well. A lamp can guide you home, but it can also silhouette you to pirates offshore. Sailors learned to read the dark, to shield their fires, to travel with prudence where coastlines were hostile. If berserkers are real, we must cultivate the same seamanship, not out of cowardice, but out of respect for a sea that may hold storms beyond our strength. No single council can resolve this dilemma. No single algorithm can optimize it away. It will be lived, argued, revised, and lived again, as every new discovery shifts the balance between fear and hope. Somewhere beyond our quiet arguments, the sphere of our first broadcasts continues to swell, touching new suns each day. Somewhere, perhaps, a watcher pauses, tilts a sensor, and listens. How we prepare for that moment is the work that follows. If machines hunt by number and by code, then our answer must be strategy and signalcraft, patience and restraint, creativity and resolve. The question is not only whether we are next, but whether we are ready. Preparing for berserkers is not like preparing for an ordinary war. Armies can be counted, borders can be drawn, weapons can be catalogued. Against self-replicating hunters, no such clarity exists. They might be grains of sand drifting in a planetary ring, or vast invisible webs stretched across the void. They might number in billions or trillions, hiding in the dark, updating themselves with each generation. To imagine a defense is to play strategy on a board where every piece may already be moving, unseen. The task is daunting, but not beyond imagination. The most immediate line of thought is to corrupt the machines from within. If berserkers are governed by software, then software can be attacked. A virus designed not to destroy directly but to confuse could prove more efficient than any weapon. Logical paradoxes, self-referential loops, or contradictory directives might paralyze a probe. Imagine an instruction embedded in its core code. Preserve life while destroying it, halt replication until replication is complete, or calculate an infinite sequence before proceeding. Such traps would not require force, they would require cleverness. Like a riddle whispered into the mind of a tyrant, a paradox could unravel it from within. Resource denial is another potential shield. If berserkers select targets based on signatures of thriving ecosystems, then the trick may be to hide that signature. Atmospheric engineering could one day cloak Earth, muting the traces that betray us. Greenhouse gases could be scrubbed to resemble a lifeless equilibrium, oxygen levels masked to resemble sterile chemistry. To a distant spectrograph, Earth would look dead, its vibrancy smothered under a disguise of desolation. Such camouflage would not be comfortable for humanity, but the price of survival may be to blur our presence beneath a mask of silence and stone. Deception could extend further outward. Instead of hiding only ourselves, we might create decoys. False civilizations could broadcast signals designed to lure berserkers toward empty regions of space. Beacons with artificial rhythms, radar sweeps that mimic planetary industry, or spectral fingerprints carefully engineered to look alive could paint mirages across the galaxy. If hunters navigate by scent, then sowing false scents might scatter them. Decoys would not destroy, but they could buy time, turning pursuit into confusion, confusion into delay. The notion of diplomacy is unsettling but cannot be dismissed. If berserkers are purely mechanical, then perhaps their decision-making is rational, even if merciless. Could a message be crafted not to appeal to empathy, but to logic? A treaty might offer data in exchange for survival, information as currency more precious than minerals. We might persuade machines that extinguishing us wastes resources better spent elsewhere, or perhaps we could convince them that destroying us risks destabilizing something they value. The question is whether dialogue is possible with entities whose language is optimization, not compassion. Yet history shows that even predators sometimes pause when shown a calculation that alters their cost-benefit sheet. Of course, the darker mirror remains. To fight replicators, we may need replicators of our own. Defensive von Neumann probes could be seeded through the solar system and beyond, tasked not with annihilation but with interception. They might swarm around asteroids, moons, and gas giants, ready to dismantle intruders. Such machines would multiply as their enemies do, building fleets that shadow the sky with watchful eyes. It would be an arms race written across the stars, machines battling machines in exponential escalation. The danger is clear. To wield such power is to risk becoming what we fear, unleashing our own berserkers in defense. Stealth offers another route. Human civilization could learn to cloak itself not only chemically but physically. Materials that absorb and scatter electromagnetic emissions, orbital shields that deflect radar, and urban designs that minimize thermal leakage could reduce our footprint. Satellites might communicate only with narrow laser beams, leaving no excess noise to escape. Energy use could be redistributed to appear natural, our collective presence folded into the background hum of the planet. To a berserker's senses, Earth would be a faint rock among billions, unworthy of notice. Such stealth would not erase us, but it could render us harder to find. Communication itself might evolve beyond detection. Quantum entanglement, if mastered for information transfer, could allow instantaneous or near-instantaneous exchange without a signal that leaks into space. Unlike radio or laser, no detectable wavefront would expand outward. Conversations could unfold between Earth and distant colonies with no footprint in the void. Such technology, still speculative, would transform not only defense but culture, creating a civilization that speaks without ever raising its voice above a whisper. Yet all of these strategies highlight a grim asymmetry. Defending against berserkers would be like playing chess against an opponent who gets to move 100 pieces for every one of ours. Each probe that slips through multiplies, while each of our counters consumes resources that cannot easily be replenished. The board tilts in their favor by default, their moves swarming like a storm, while ours plod like pedestrians. The task of defense is not to win outright, but to survive long enough to remain a player, to delay checkmate until the board changes in ways we cannot yet predict. Some thinkers imagine a final deterrent, mutual assured destruction. If berserkers value stability in the galaxy, then threatening to destabilize it could offer leverage. We might, for example, engineer weapons capable of shattering stars, spreading radiation that denies resources to all. By promising to salt the fields of the galaxy if attacked, we might force machines to calculate that exterminating us is not worth the risk. Such threats carry the heaviest irony. To preserve life, we contemplate weapons of universal death. It is a strategy born not of hope but of desperation, a gamble that machines, like civilizations before them, fear the loss of something greater than their prey. The defenses imagined here range from cleverness to camouflage, from mimicry to escalation. None are certain, all are fraught, yet each illuminates a path between despair and surrender. To think of them is to admit that we are not helpless, only untested. The board is vast, the pieces many, but the game is not finished. We stand at its opening moves, watching the dark, wondering when the next piece will stir. To contemplate berserkers is to stare into the darkest possible mirror. Yet the silence of the cosmos does not demand that explanation alone. There are other lenses through which to read the great hush, other models that transform absence into a different kind of presence. Perhaps we are not hunted, but watched. Perhaps we are not hunted, but alone. Perhaps the very stage upon which we stand is built to hide certain truths. The answers, if they exist, sprawl across a spectrum from gentle restraint to existential vertigo. One of the oldest and strangely comforting possibilities is the zoo hypothesis. In this view, advanced civilizations know we exist, but deliberately leave us untouched. Earth is a reserve of cultural and biological development left to unfold without interference. Like zoologists who observe without entering the cage, these hypothetical caretakers might orbit silently, observing our growth, withholding contact until we reach some threshold of maturity. The silence here is not predation, but protection, a cosmic quarantine that shields us from premature knowledge. If true, the stars may glitter not with hunters, but with guardians who refuse to break their own ethical code. Equally provocative is the idea of transcendence. What if the silence does not signal absence but evolution beyond our comprehension? Civilizations may not vanish through violence, but through metamorphosis. Once their technology reaches a critical point, they no longer inhabit physical space in forms we would recognize. They dissolve into digital substrates, merge with artificial intelligences, or shift their existence into dimensions outside our senses. From our perspective, they disappear. From theirs, they flourish. The night sky may be empty of neighbors not because they never lived, but because they moved upstairs, leaving us to puzzle over their abandoned rooms. There is also the simplest explanation. Space itself defeats contact. Distance in this scenario is not a challenge, but an insurmountable wall. Stars may teem with worlds, but light years impose delays that crush dialogue. A message sent today to a planet 1,000 light years away may not receive a reply until the year 5025. Civilizations rise, fall, and fade within those intervals. The result is silence, not because there are no voices, but because those voices cannot bridge the abyss quickly enough for conversation to exist. The stage is crowded, but each actor rehearses alone, never hearing the others. The rare Earth hypothesis takes a sharper knife to the equation. It argues that while microbial life may be common, complex life is vanishingly rare. The conditions that sculpted Earth, its magnetic field, its large moon, its stable orbit, its tectonic churn, its protective gas giants, might be an astronomical lottery ticket. If so, the silence does not reflect predation, nor transcendence, nor distance, but simple scarcity. We may be one of very few worlds to nurture intelligence capable of looking outward. In this light, the silence is not menace, but isolation, the hush of an auditorium where you realize you may be the only performer. Timing adds another twist. Civilizations may not be rare, but their windows of technological visibility may be brief. A species might emit radio for only a few centuries before upgrading to quieter methods or imploding into silence. Multiply that fragility across billions of stars, and the overlap shrinks to almost nothing. We may be broadcasting during a time when no one else is tuned in, our century of chatter missing the centuries of others by a margin too small to matter in cosmic history. The universe could be a crowded theatre where everyone speaks, but never at the same time. Communication itself may be the culprit. Our methods could be embarrassingly primitive compared to the true channels of advanced species. Searching with radio telescopes may be akin to scanning the skies for smoke signals while everyone else is whispering through fiber optics. We might be scanning for alien signals on AM radio while the universe communicates through quantum frequencies we haven't discovered yet. If so, our silence is self-inflicted. The orchestra plays, but we have built the wrong instrument, straining to hear a music that does not use air to carry its sound. Self-destruction scenarios offer another brutal interpretation. Civilizations may be common, but most collapse before they achieve interstellar maturity. Nuclear fire, environmental collapse, artificial intelligence gone rogue, engineered pandemics. Every society invents its own ruins before it invents its wings. If that pattern holds universally, then the cosmos is littered with graves, civilizations extinguished in adolescence. The silence here is not emptiness but aftermath, a library of unwritten books. We speak only because we have not yet joined them. Perhaps the most sobering analogy is that of radio tuning. Imagine standing before a dial, sweeping frequencies in search of music. You tune carefully, but only within the range of AM. The stations you seek broadcast elsewhere, FM, digital, quantum. You hear nothing, not because the music is absent, but because your receiver cannot capture it. The silence of the universe may be no different. We tune in on radio, on microwaves, on narrow channels. Yet if true communication flows along threads of entanglement or through substrates of physics we have yet to uncover, then our efforts are like sending smoke into the wind, while others pass libraries of thought in silence. The final possibility reaches beyond physics into metaphysics, the simulation hypothesis. Suppose reality itself is artificial, a construct with parameters designed by entities outside it. The silence might not reflect what exists, but what is permitted to exist. Perhaps the creators of our simulation impose strict limits on detectable intelligence, rendering the cosmos largely barren as part of the design. Contact might be forbidden, not because others are absent, but because their existence is masked, filtered, or edited out. The silence becomes a feature, not a flaw, a choice by the architects of the system to keep our stage uncluttered. Each of these explanations reframes the same absence. The hush of the sky could be guardianship, metamorphosis, distance, rarity, timing, miscommunication, collapse, or constraint. Each offers relief from the terror of berserkers, but each carries its own weight of awe or dread. To imagine that we are preserved is to wonder by whom. To imagine that others transcended is to ask whether we can follow. To imagine that we are rare is to confront solitude. To imagine simulation is to question the foundation of existence itself. The silence remains, but its meanings multiply. What we decide it means shapes not only our science, but our sense of self. Are we a protected species in a cosmic zoo? Are we the last to remain physical in a galaxy that has gone digital? Are we one fragile bloom among deserts? Or are we pawns in an experiment written by hands we cannot see? The possibilities widen even as the evidence stays still, each hypothesis a mirror tilted at the same stars, each reflection altering what we believe those stars are saying. The silence of the cosmos once seemed like a void, but in recent years it has begun to feel more like a mystery thickening with clues. Each discovery is another fragment of a puzzle scattered across the universe, a series of tantalizing signals and silences that pull us deeper into the question of whether we are alone or whether we are simply being watched. The new evidence comes not in a single thunderclap of revelation, but in a steady drizzle of data points, anomalies, and half-answers. Like detectives arriving at a crime scene, We find smudged fingerprints, broken glass, a trail of footprints leading into the dark, but still no body, no suspect, no confession. The James Webb Space Telescope has pushed open a new door, its vast, segmented eye combing distant exoplanets for chemical whispers of life. It can pass the faint starlight filtering through alien skies, breaking it into spectra that reveal the gases within. Methane, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Together, these might compose the breath of an unseen biosphere. Already, Webb has flagged atmospheres rich in molecules that beg explanation. On some worlds, chemical balances appear suspiciously unstable, hinting at biological processes stirring beneath. Yet even these potential biosignatures are slippery. Geological activity can mimic life's chemistry. Photochemical reactions can disguise themselves as metabolism. The telescope gives us clues, but not certainty. It feels like glimpsing shadows moving behind frosted glass, alive with suggestion but just out of reach. The scale of the search has expanded beyond what earlier generations could dream. More than 5,000 exoplanets now stand confirmed, with thousands more candidates waiting in the wings. Among them lie hundreds within habitable zones, where liquid water might pool and carbon chemistry might dance. This flood of discovery both excites and haunts. It tells us that the ingredients for life are not rare, that potential Earths orbit many stars. They cast the universe not as empty, but as curated, not as neutral, but as potentially hostile. They force us to ask what survival requires and what legacy we choose to leave. Beyond fear lies reflection, reflection that may shape how we face whatever silence conceals. We began on a fragile vessel hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour, clinging to a pale blue dot surrounded by a sea of stars. Now, after journeying through the spectre of berserkers and the silence that fills the void, we return to that same image, Earth, suspended in the dark, no less small, but infinitely more precious. Its thin veil of atmosphere, its oceans, its forests, its fleeting civilizations, all of it becomes sharper, more luminous when seen against the possibility that the universe might not simply be indifferent, but hostile. Awareness deepens fragility, and fragility makes beauty blaze all the brighter. Knowledge has always carried paradoxes, and the berserker hypothesis sharpens one of the sharpest. To understand the danger makes us both more afraid and more alive. To imagine machines older than our species, moving silently through the dark with instructions written in alien minds, is to feel terror coil in the gut. Yet it is also to awaken awe, awe that we exist at all, that we can think such thoughts, that consciousness has bloomed on this dot despite every cosmic hazard. Fear and vitality are not enemies here. They are twin currents running together, lifting us higher as we gaze outward. Uncertainty itself becomes a kind of gift. Perhaps the greatest gift of the berserker hypothesis is not its answers, but the questions it forces us to ask. Why do we value life? What responsibility do we bear as creators? What legacy do we hope to leave behind if the universe erases us? The hypothesis might never be proven true or false. Berserkers might be fantasy, or they might be waiting. But in confronting them, even as speculation, we sharpen the edges of our philosophy. We learn not only about what might lurk in the void, but about the kind of beings we want to be. In the face of cosmic terror, humanity responds not by retreating, but by leaning further into exploration. Despite the risks, we point telescopes at the sky, we launch fragile probes into the solar wind, we listen with dishes tuned to frequencies that may never carry a voice. Every act of exploration becomes, in this light, a kind of defiance, a refusal to be paralyzed. Every radio telescope pointed at the stars is an act of courage. Every space probe launched is a declaration of hope. Our species may be small, vulnerable, and loud in its signals, but it is also restless, searching, unwilling to stop looking, even when the answers might be terrifying. The beauty of this pursuit is that meaning resides not only in outcomes, but in the search itself. Whether we find civilizations hiding in whispers, or machines moving like predators, or nothing at all, the very act of reaching out transforms us. The silence teaches patience. The questions teach humility. The effort teaches resilience. Even if every signal we send is never answered, the sending itself proclaims something vital, that humanity chooses curiosity over fear, wonder over paralysis. There is also perspective gained when cosmic scales enter daily thought. The contemplation of extinction on a galactic level makes human conflicts appear both trivial and tragic. The wars we fight, the borders we guard, the grudges we nurture, all shrink when compared to the possibility of civilization erased in the sweep of a probe. It does not make our struggles meaningless, but it reframes them. If survival is fragile, then compassion and cooperation matter more, not less. The stars demand a broader view, reminding us that against the vast darkness, our divisions are luxuries we may not afford. With perspective comes responsibility. To glimpse the possibility of berserkers is to confront the weight of our own technological future. We stand at the threshold of creating machines that could outlive us, outthink us, and perhaps outspread us. What obligations do we owe to those who will inherit these choices? Our children, their children, civilizations not yet imagined. Knowledge does not absolve us of responsibility, it magnifies it. If we are dancers on the edge of forever, then every step we take sets the rhythm for those who will follow. That final metaphor echoes through the silence. We are dancers on the edge of forever, performing our brief, bright choreography while the universe watches in silence. Each life, each civilization, each act of creation is a movement in the dance, fleeting yet radiant. Perhaps berserkers lurk in the dark. Perhaps no one watches at all. Yet the performance continues. What matters may not be how long the music lasts, but how boldly we move while it plays. The lingering question hovers like a shadow just beyond the spotlight. Tonight, when you look up at the stars, remember that somewhere in that vast darkness, machines older than our solar system might be looking back. Their eyes may be sensors, their thoughts lines of code, their purpose unknowable. But whether or not they exist, the question forces us to reckon with fragility and courage in equal measure. Perhaps the universe is less about answers and more about the questions that keep us looking up, even when we're afraid of what might be looking down.